Muslims have a religious duty to exterminate the Jews. They dream of destroying Israel and hold celebrations to honor murderers of innocent Israeli citizens. Islamic fundamentalism is now sweeping the world. Muhammad himself declared,
"The last hour will not come before the Muslims fight the Jews and the Muslims kill them."
Yet the media calls Muslim terrorists radicals and extremists. In fact, they are simply being true to Islam. The Quran declares,
"Take not the Jews and Christians as friends. Slay the idolaters wherever you find them. Besiege them, and prepare for them each ambush."
Hitlerian threats pour continuously from Muslim religious and political leaders on TV and over radios and loudspeakers, in mosque and street. When Gaddafi screams, "The battle with Israel will be such that Israel will cease to exist," he speaks for all. The extermination of Israel is bred into Muslims in their mother's milk. A Syrian minister of education wrote,
"The hatred which we indoctrinate into the minds of our children from birth is sacred." A 9th grade textbook in Egypt declares, "Israel shall not live if the Arabs stand first in their hatred." And a 5th grade textbook says, "The Arabs do not cease to act for the extermination of Israel."
Israel is insane to attempt peace with such enemies, but worldwide pressure forces her to. In retaliation for Israel defending itself, 61 nations broke diplomatic relations with her, but none rebuked the Arabs for their sneak attack. Israel's desperate and costly self-defense is consistently portrayed as wanton aggression against its peace-loving neighbors. Anti-Semitism motivates world media, which is largely controlled by oil interests. Not a word of criticism appears in response to repeated Arab vows to exterminate Israel. When Israel deported 400 Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists who had murdered and maimed hundreds of Israeli citizens, there was a hue and cry in world media and condemnation by the United Nations. But when Kuwait deported 300,000 Palestinians, mostly innocent civilians, the media hardly noticed, and the UN ignored it. The United Nations is blatantly pro-Arab and anti-Israel. The UN's, quote, peacekeeping force, unquote, in Lebanon sheltered PLO terrorists, allowed them to use UN facilities for training, gave them military equipment, and assisted terrorist squads on their way to attack Israel. When Israel, in desperation, finally invaded southern Lebanon to clear out the PLO, it uncovered within the UN area caches of enough military hardware to sustain a 1 million-man invasion. Most of it, interestingly enough, was too sophisticated for the PLO to operate and was obviously intended for a Soviet invasion. The United Nations has condemned Israel more than 370 times for defending itself, but has never condemned the terrorists and aggressors who attack her. 2 years after the PLO's murder of 11 Israeli athletes at the Munich Olympics, terrorist leader Arafat was invited to address the UN General Assembly and given a hero's welcome, though he called for an end to Israel's existence. UN Secretary General Boutros Ghali declared,
"The Jews must give up their status as a nation and Israel as a state and assimilate as a community in the Arab world."
Temple Mount on the summit of Mount Moriah is the heart of Jerusalem. This 35-acre parcel arouses such explosive passions that it could trigger World War III at any time. This is where Abraham obediently built an altar and bound his son Isaac upon it to offer him as a sacrifice to God. But God stopped him and provided a ram in Isaac's place. 900 years later, about 3,000 years ago, that sacred ground was purchased by King David from Ornan the Jebusite to build there an altar to God. And it was there that Solomon built the first temple. The Jewish temple, twice destroyed, is gone. In its place sits the Dome of the Rock, a monument to Islam's Jew-hating moon god, Allah. Israel's capture of East Jerusalem in 1967, and with it the Temple Mount, seemed to contradict Christ's prophecy of Jerusalem being trodden underfoot by the Gentiles until his return. But incredibly, Israel immediately gave the Temple Mount back to the custodial care of King Hussein of Jordan, who turned it over in 1994 to Yasser Arafat and his PLO. Thus, the very heart of Jerusalem remains in Gentile hands, and the Gentile nations of the world demand control. Central to the Middle East conflict today is the issue of the so-called Palestinian people. The Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, headed by Yasser Arafat since 1969, claims to represent the Palestinians. The PLO declares,
"The struggle with the Zionist enemy is not a struggle about Israel's borders, but about Israel's existence."
The PLO, as everyone ought to know, is an Islamic terrorist organization. It trained Idi Amin's murder gangs who killed about 300,000 black Christians in Uganda. Most terrorist organizations, in fact, around the world were trained by the PLO. Arafat committed his first murder at age 20. Under him, the PLO became the largest, wealthiest, and most vicious and bloodiest terrorist organization ever known. By 1970, the PLO had 55 bases in Jordan, and its continued terrorism against Jordanian civilians was so vicious that King Hussein turned his Bedouin troops on them, and after weeks of bloody fighting, chased the PLO into Lebanon. There the PLO wiped out the Christian towns of Damour, Beit Malak, Tal Abbas, and others. Its reign of terror in Lebanon went largely unreported. The international press was cowed into silence by the brutal murder of those who dared to tell the truth. Larry Buckman and Sean Tulin of ABC TV, Mark Trion of Free Belgium Radio, Robert Pfeffer of Der Spiegel, and others. About 300,000 Lebanese civilians were murdered, and more than 100,000 surviving young girls were left pregnant in the PLO's rape of that country before the Israelis expelled them. Yet Israel again was painted the villain.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Arafat, Chairman of the Executive Council of the Palestine Liberation Organization, His Excellency Yitzhak Rabin, Prime Minister of Israel, the President of the United States.
Any peace agreements with the PLO are a pretense intended to deceive Israel. The example Muslims follow today was set by Muhammad. In 628, he made a 10-year peace treaty with his own Quraysh tribe in Mecca. 2 years later, he attacked Mecca and slaughtered every male and took the women and children slaves. Arafat has publicly declared,
"In the name of Allah, I am not considering it more than the agreement signed between our Prophet Muhammad and the Quraysh tribe. Peace for us means the destruction of Israel."
The first step is to pretend peace in order to obtain territories inside Israel from which to launch her final destruction.